So, Robyn.
You're welcome. This technology worked. The live didn't work. So what do you do?
I could see you pressing the button. You were pressing, accepting it. So you just didn't want us to.
Let me in.
Well, we're here now, which is good, and we're going to, help people out in this program who have asked some specific questions that I can't answer because, my expertise is teaching people what a whole food plant-based diet is and then how to actually incorporate it into your life, how to eat it and how to make the food. And if people have some specific issues or problems that are coming up, health issues, I always recommend they go and see a healthcare professional. And I mentioned you a lot in the program, and when someone started talking about their hair is falling out, I thought, I don't know anything about this. This is new. And then a few of the other ladies started saying, my hair's falling out. And I thought, Robyn, maybe I could ask you and see if you could come and ask that. And then everyone started asking a lot of other questions too, which I know that you're very interested in, which is IBS and menopause and EFT and a few other things. So we could delve that in tonight and answer the questions people have asked. But first of all, how did we meet? Like, I was trying to...
We met at the conference at Wahroonga, that was put on by the Adventist Hospital. The one that who spoke there? It was Brenda Davis, yes. Rosemary Stanton, and if I recall, it was Kate. What's her name? Dietitian at North Sydney. It'll come to me in a sec. So we met there. I think we'd sort of known each other online, perhaps. Maybe that's where we met face to face.
Yeah, it was. That's right. I remember that now. I went up to see that. This is a debate about whole food plant-based diet and paleo. And
that was Brenda Davis's topic. Yes, she has a great presentation, sort of unpicking all the myths around paleo and basically laying out, this is what actual Paleolithic people ate. They weren't clubbing woolly mammoths once a day because I don't know whether you've noticed, but humans are small and puny, and particularly back then they were really big. Yeah. So mostly what primitive humans were eating was plants, because plants don't run away when you try to eat them. Yeah. So occasionally, yes, humans would come across something of animal origin that they could eat, but it made up such a small part of their diet. And the reason we know that is because fossilized Paleolithic feces, paleo poop, has been preserved in some places, and from that they're called coproliths. They're fossilized paleo poops, and people who specialize in studying this, imagine that. Like, at what point in your childhood do you decide, when I grow up, I would like to study fossilized poo? But they do. And so calculations have been made that early humans are eating about 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. Now, you don't get that by clubbing woolly mammoths because there is zero fiber in animal products. You only get that much fiber by eating plants. So that's what Fred Flintstone was actually eating. It wasn't dinosaur steaks.
Yeah, definitely plants, because plants is the only place that you find fiber.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Unless you're in the intestine woolly mammoth, because woolly mammoths were herbivores.
That's exactly right. So yes, you could get your greens by eating the guts of another animal, but on the whole, people are actually eating plants firsthand, not secondhand.
I know, it's so easy. You just go walk along through the forest and pick it,
That's it. It doesn't run away, and it doesn't try to bite you when you eat it.
Yeah, that's true. So I'd like to introduce you, Robyn. We've met, and I remember back then, that was about 5 or 6 years ago, and then we caught up again, recently. You came to our house here in Byron. We had lunch together.
Yeah, a fabulous lunch. Thank you.
Pleasure. And you spoke at the Beat and you gave a nice talk there. But one of the things I noticed, because you've been eating this way for a long time now as well, and you even 5 years ago when I met you to now is like chalk and cheese in your physiology, your skin. You are younger looking. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And the same's happened to me.
Yeah, I think, look, I haven't actually eaten meat since I was 15. I became an ethical but very ignorant vegetarian at 15, so stopped eating animal products, but did a really bad job of a vegetarian diet. And I think, you know, as you know, the more you get immersed in the science of plant-based nutrition, the more tweaks you make to your own diet. So I smashed down such an enormous amount of greens, you know, compared to what I used to. And it's like every year I kind of notch it up a little. I do more exercise, not less. I eat better. I'm working on the sleep. I meditate. And so, yeah, it's interesting because I know I'm getting older, aren't we all? And you know, there's some little signs of it. There's the odd grey hair sprouting out there. You kind of expect that at 46. Like, what are you going to do? But in terms of how I feel, I don't feel any older. I mean, I feel younger than I did in my teens because I didn't eat very well back then. So I've got more energy now than I used to have. It's cool.
It is cool.
Yeah, folks, keep eating plants.
Eat plants and lots of leafy greens. That's been the difference for me too since I had that heart attack. And over the years, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, I really got the message about greens. And it's at least 4 cups a day, at least, you know, 2 big handfuls, whether it's cooked or
Get those greens in. Yeah, totally. Get those greens in. Go greens.
Now, you're super qualified to be talking on this subject. So I'm just going to rattle off. I got this off a website. I'm not sure where it is, but I thought it summed up everything you do quite well. I'm just going to read it, if that's all right. Just so people know where you're coming from. Okay?
Yeah.
It says, Robyn is a university qualified naturopath with a Bachelor of Health Science and the Dean's Medal for Outstanding Academic Achievement from the University of New England, a Bachelor of Health Science Honours with First Class Honours from Edith Cowan University, and a Diploma of Naturopathy from Australasian College of Natural Therapies. So that's, you know, quite incredible, but it doesn't stop there. Robyn is also an Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine certified lifestyle medicine practitioner. And in addition, Robyn holds a graduate diploma of counselling from the Australian College of Applied Psychology and level 3 EFT practitioner and matrix reprinting practitioner accreditations. Now, some of you might not know what EFT and reprinting is, but you will by the end of our
We'll get to that.
Robyn. And so Robyn is highly qualified and she's helped so many people. She started her naturopathic practice in 1994, and I know that I've come across a lot of people that she's helped. She's highly skilled in diagnosis and prescription, and with a whole food plant-based diet. She lives it, she eats it, she's an incredible example of the power of it, just in her own physiology and her own health. So if you really want to, if you have a health issue, something very specific, Robyn's a great person to go and see because she can help diagnose what's going on and help adjust things, especially if you really want to follow a whole food plant-based diet, continue to do that. Now, the other thing is, Robyn, you got an interest in the incurable medical conditions, the chronic ones like IBS and CFS and migraines and high blood pressure.
No, that's the fun stuff.
That's the fun stuff.
The fun stuff. Like, as soon as someone kind of says, "Hey, there's nothing you can do about this," I go, "Really?" Well, That's what you think. So, yeah, but no, I'm making light of it. But seriously, I mean, when a person gets a diagnosis of something like high blood pressure and they're told you have to take medications for the rest of your life, or a woman's told, you know, you have endometriosis, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. It's a terrible thing to say to a person. Well, you've been in that situation. You were told with your heart medications, you'll be on these for the rest of your life. And you know what it's like? You're going to go, oh, I don't really want that. You know, these drugs have side effects. It doesn't feel right. And the problem is that people really aren't empowered with the knowledge that they need in order to understand, you know, why they got their condition in the first place and what they can do to reverse it, which is why I love what you're doing with your program, because you're providing people with exactly that knowledge. With the so-called incurables, there is, I suppose, there's the medical model of these diseases, and then there's kind of what we understand through epidemiological research or population-based research, and also what has been published in terms of what we call intervention research, which is where you take a bunch of people with the disease, you put them on a particular protocol and you see what happens. And actually there has been a lot of research doing exactly that with a plant-based diet for high blood pressure and diabetes and autoimmune disease and a lot of these other conditions. So it's not just speculation is what I'm saying. It's also not just anecdote. There's published science on this, which I like to geek out on, but that's the real satisfaction is actually bringing it to people and seeing them get better.
Yeah, and that's it, you know, the incurable. Like, you know, we've seen it in this program, like literally within 4 weeks of following a whole food plant-based diet. What I do, I get people to get their bloods done beforehand and after. And at about the 5-week mark, they go back and get their bloods done again. In that time, doctors have halved people's blood pressure medications, have taken them off blood pressure medication. People lose between 2 and 10 kilos. And there's one guy in our group who had type 2 diabetes, and within, I think, 12 weeks, all his bloods were showing he was no longer diabetic. Doctors couldn't believe it. They thought something was wrong. They hooked him up to all these monitors for 24 hours twice. Said, there's something wrong. He's going, no, it's the food. No, there's something wrong. And I think it's now, his name's Trevor, and I think we're into, I don't know, maybe 17 weeks now, and his doctors just acknowledged that he no longer has type 2 diabetes.
That's so amazing. And what's really good too is that you send people to their doctors to do this, because you're actually educating the doctors. And some of them will just go la 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 and refuse to pay attention to it. But others will go, huh, that's interesting. They told me back in medical school, once you're a diabetic, always a diabetic. Once on hypertensive drugs, always on, or once on antihypertensives, always on antihypertensives. But hang on a minute. This person's actually dropped their blood pressure, become non-diabetic, got their HbA1c back in the normal range, got off meds. And some of them will get curious about it and want to know more. And I actually, you know, I get doctors referring patients to me now, sort of on the sly. They don't really talk about it to their colleagues. So embarrassing, you know, sending someone to a naturopath. But they, when the good ones, the ones who are open-minded, when they see results like that, it makes them think. So I think it's really great that you get people to do their before and afters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of my, you know, I've spoken about it before, you know, from stage, that my mission is that one day people will be able to sit down with, they've got heart disease, diabetes, or any of the, you know, these lifestyle-related diseases, these chronic ones, where a doctor can say, you've got a choice. You can have a whole food plant-based diet, or you can continue to take the medications. The medications will keep you alive, but you'll feel like crap. Or you can have a whole food diet, plant-based diet, and in most cases, it will reverse what you have and you'll feel amazing. Because I was never given that. And that's actually one of the reasons why I get everyone to go and do it, because I know they're going to see results. The doctors are going to start going, wow. And this is not just one time, you know, if we can get people going back and back.
It's again and again, absolutely. And those initial results are impressive. But what's really cool is to watch, you know, like if say they're getting their cholesterol done once or twice a year, it's going to keep coming down. The blood pressure keeps coming down until it reaches a healthy level. It's not like your blood pressure drops until it's 80/50. It just comes down to a healthy level and then sits there.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of people now are, you know, 120/80. 110/70, it's coming to that.
Yeah.
Especially 10 months now, you're seeing it. Cholesterol dropping point by point. A lot of people now are under what Esselstyn classes as heart attack proof, under 3.9. You know, every cardiologist in Australia wants to get people under 3.9 with medication, you know.
Statins, and you can do it with the food. And
but it's happening. Like, you know, people, huge drops. It's so exciting. So I'm, you know, yeah. So let's have a chat about these questions, shall we?
Yeah.
Hair loss. Let's start with hair loss, because that was last week. You know, that was a hot topic, hair loss, and particularly one person who's been doing this, been in the group now for about 10 months, I think, eating strictly whole food plant-based diet on the road. All the benefits, blood pressure's dropped, cholesterol's dropped, lost weight, everything's going well for them. But all of a sudden they started to lose their hair. And then everyone pointed out that I'm losing hair. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, okay. Let's just start with a little bit of a primer on hair and hair growth. So hair goes through 3 stages. The first is called the anaphase. So ana as in anabolic, building up. So during the anaphase, hair is actually actively growing. So the hair shaft is lengthening. And the length of anaphase is actually genetically determined. So, you know, some people, you've seen those Indian girls who grow their hair right down to their rear end. That's actually genetically determined. Not everyone can do that. Most people's hair will stop growing before it reaches that length. When it stops growing, it goes into what's called metaphase, which is just the hair isn't actively growing anymore. But it's not falling out. Then the next stage is the telophase, and that's where the hair shaft actually, you know, separates out and falls out. So normally, I mean, hair follicles are in one of those different stages of growth, and you know, any given hair follicle could be in any one of those stages of growth. But when you have a sudden physiological change, you can get what's called a telogen effluvium, which is where a whole bunch of hair follicles all fall out at the same time. And you've already actually mentioned one of the causes of that, and that's rapid weight loss. So when people lose weight very quickly, there is a delay with this. There's a 6-week to 3-month delay between the stressful event, physiologically stressful event, such as rapid weight loss, and then all the hair falling out, or not all of it, but you know, a larger than normal percentage of hair falling out at one time. So this is commonly observed, for example, with bariatric surgery, because when people have their stomach stapled, they lose weight pretty quickly, and well, they're happy with that, but the hair falls out. Women will have noticed that after pregnancy. That's another physiological event. So, you know, during pregnancy, you get all this hair. It's great. It's big mane, right? You can do 80s hair without even trying. Remember 80s hair?
Yeah. I had hair in the 80s.
I've never seen a photo. You've got to send a photo. Yeah. You with 80s hair. Because you were surfing, you probably would have had, like, you know, long hair.
I had the big wavy. I had a lot of curls and the mullet.
No, you had a mullet. No way. Actually, I can sort of picture that. So yeah, and so women have this big pregnancy hair, and then the baby's born and all the hair falls out, right? So that's not just a weight loss event. I mean, because obviously you're losing weight, but it's actually you're losing baby weight. The main thing there is a rapid decline in hormones. So that's the second cause. Estrogen is a hormone that promotes the growth of hair. And so, of course, during pregnancy, you've got this heightened estrogen level, and so the hair just goes woohoo. after the baby's born, a woman's estrogen level goes splat. And so that's another contributing factor to the hair loss. And of course, when women go through menopause, their estrogen level declines as well. And so, I mean, hair gets thinner as you get older. There's no way of getting around that. Your hair will get thinner, your skin will get thinner, nails become a bit more thinner and friable. There are some age-related changes that we really can't do anything about. And the amount of hair that you start with, so if you have really, really thick hair when you're younger, you're going to be less affected by age-related hair thinning. But if your hair was kind of fine and thin to start with, it's going to be more noticeable, you know, when particularly when women go through menopause, that their hair will get thinner. And that will happen no matter what diet you're on. However, when you shift to a whole food plant-based diet, you're losing weight, and so because you have less fat cells or less fat now, fat cells are a source of estrogen, and so you drop the body fat, there's less of your own estrogen being produced, and also you're not consuming the estrogen from animal products anymore. So there is a drop in circulating estrogen levels when both men and women adopt a plant-based diet. Now, this is a good thing from the point of view of women's breast cancer risk, because we know that, you know, most breast cancers are estrogen sensitive. They're stimulated, their growth is stimulated by estrogen. But, you know, if you undertake this diet change pretty rapidly, your estrogen level will fall, and, you know, you can get some telogen effluvium because of that. Now, fortunately, your body readjusts to the sort of the lower, healthier level of estrogen, and it comes back. It's just that you do have to be patient with hair regrowth. When you've had a big, massive shedding, there's going to be at least 3 to 4 months of you waiting for the new growth to come in. So hang in there.
It will come back. So is there foods, is there anything that they can do to stimulate more estrogen in the body while this is happening?
There's not a lot of, so I think most people have heard of so-called phytoestrogens or plant estrogens, and they're not really estrogen, because estrogen's a steroid hormone. It's made from cholesterol, and as most people know, plants don't have cholesterol. So there's no actual estrogen in the likes of soy or linseed or anything like that, but there are compounds that bind to estrogen receptors. There really hasn't been a lot of research on, you know, if you eat more linseed or if you have more, you know, tofu, will the phytoestrogens assist with you maintaining your hair? Because quite frankly, no one's doing this research, because there's a relatively small number of people eating this way. So when we get to millions and millions of people adopting this diet, researchers will say, we should study this. In the meantime, I think it's well worth trying, just making sure that you're having, look, I recommend that everyone eat a tablespoon of ground linseed a day. And particularly for postmenopausal women, this is a great way of reducing your risk of breast cancer. For the blokes, it's good for preventing prostate cancer. Hello, fellas, I haven't forgotten you. But certainly from the point of view of just getting you know, so-called plant estrogens in, that's a good strategy. Any kind of unprocessed soy food, edamame, tofu, tempeh, these do contain quite a lot of phytoestrogens as well. So like I say, not a lot of research, but these are healthy foods. Why not give them a try?
Okay, great. So really the hair loss, you know, one of the main reasons is people have lost weight quickly.
Yes.
That's upset their hormonal balance. Yep. Estrogen. In a sense, yes. So there's two things going on there. First of all, women's bodies in particular are just designed to hang on to weight. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Men have more testosterone, it's a fat burning hormone. Women have more estrogen, it's a fat storage hormone. So the way that women's bodies are wired is we hang on to weight. And in an evolutionary setting, that was very advantageous, because you never knew when the next food shortage was going to hit. So if you had a bit of fat on you and you happened to be pregnant when the famine started,
bad, you'll be okay, you know, you and the baby can live off your fat reserves until there's food again. So fine in an evolutionary setting, not fine now when we don't have a lot of famines. Our problem is food excess rather than food shortage. So in other words, women's bodies kind of detect any sort of weight loss as bad. It's what we want. Like if we're overweight, we want to lose weight, but our bodies are saying bad, 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 bad. There must be a famine, okay? So if there's a famine, what do? We kind of ditch any tissue that isn't necessary. And hair, while it's nice, is not necessary. So it's, you know, throw the hair under the bus. Now, once your body kind of gets used to the fact that, oh, okay, no, we're sitting at this weight and it's fine, there's plenty of food coming in, then the hair comes back because your body doesn't perceive that you're in famine anymore. But when there's a really rapid weight loss, from your body's point of view, this is perceived as a stress.
Yeah. So weight loss, there's less estrogen because estrogen is stored in the fat cells, which estrogen on the hair. And if it's falling out now, that's okay.
Yeah,
ride through it for the next.
Hair growth. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you are in menopause, you're going to have lower estrogen levels, and you know, your hair's going to thin, and there's not much we can do about that. Is that?
Your hair will thin. I mean, look, you look at even old people who are in really good shape. They have less hair than they used to, and they'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean anything bad. It is just one of those unavoidable consequences of aging. We can hold back the tide in many ways with the plant-based diet, but we can't keep all our hair.
Okay. Has you know, because the whole food plant-based diet eliminates processed oils and fats, and we eat less fats usually. You know, getting in a whole form in nuts or seeds and avocado. Is there anything? Have you come across anything linking that to hair loss, or?
Not really, no. No, it's not so related to fats. No.
Okay. It's the estrogen.
In fact, I mean, most people will notice. Yeah, it is. It's more related to estrogen. So when the connection between estrogen and fat is basically that your own fat cells make a compound that's converted into estrogen. Yeah, but it's not really about not having enough fat in your diet. That's not the cause of it. It's really just anything that causes rapid weight loss is going to trigger this telogen effluvium.
And that'll happen in meat eaters as well. So you're a meat eater and you have rapid weight loss.
Absolutely. Like I say, I mean, it's very commonly observed with people who are undergoing bariatric surgery. And you know, and people who are doing like these extreme weight loss programs, you know, like The Biggest Loser and so forth, where these people are losing weight very rapidly, they're on an extraordinarily high animal protein diet. That's what the contestants are always put on, and they'll still lose hair. So it's not about you not getting enough protein. It's not about you not getting enough fat. It's just when you lose weight rapidly, healthfully or unhealthfully, you will have the chances are higher that you'll undergo this telogen effluvium.
Awesome. Well, that's a relief. So
but
guys,
it grows back. It grows back. Just be patient. Yeah.
Be patient. Just be patient. It'll grow back. Just keep doing what you're doing, because you know the benefits far outweigh freaking out about this and maybe doing something else. You know, you want to stay.
Yeah, and I want to say just one thing, because a lot of the time people are told, oh, this diet is nutrient deficient, that's why it's happening. The kind of diet that you've got people on that's full of greens and grains and legumes, it's not nutrient deficient. And in particular, many times people are told, oh, you must be iron deficient. Postmenopausal women are not iron deficient unless they have some source of bleeding, like bleeding, ulcers or hemorrhoids or something like that. When you stop menstruating, your iron levels go to the levels of a man, basically. So it's not low iron. There's tons of iron in plant foods. You get plenty of iron. The problem when you go through menopause is not accumulating too much of it. Fortunately, a plant-based diet helps with that because your body gets to pick and choose how much iron it absorbs from food, and it's very smart at doing that. So it's not nutrient deficiency in the vast majority of cases.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. You know, it's interesting. I've got a few friends that were vegetarian women that always had to supplement when they were vegetarian, and then they went food plant-based, ditched the dairy, and their iron levels normalised, and they don't have to supplement anymore.
100%. Look, it's been known for ages that dairy consumption decreases iron absorption, and it also increases iron loss. Basically, in little kids, it causes occult bleeding in their gastrointestinal tract. Not so much in fully grown adults, but in adults, it just decreases your ability to absorb iron. So ditch the dairy, your iron stores start to improve if that's been a problem for you.
Well, thank you for covering the hair loss. That's good. That's going to put a lot of people on. So I really appreciate that. So let's talk about your favourite subject, which is IBS, because there's a few people in our group. One lady, well, two ladies I know of, really suffer from IBS. One has really been following this way of eating now for a good 10, since Christmas. I think, so that's 6 months, 7 months. And at about the 3-month mark, it's really kicked in and she doesn't suffer many of the symptoms anymore. You know, she has no pain, fluctuance is normal. She's just feeling really, really good. And there's another lady, well, who is suffering. She's in Europe, and I don't know how much she's actually adhering to this way of eating. She may be eating at 90%, 80%, I'm not sure. She's asked a few questions. Maybe you could share us what you know about IBS and educate us on.
100%.
You're the expert on this.
First of all, it's important to understand that IBS is kind of a basket diagnosis that is actually made up of some sub-diagnoses. So there's IBS-D, which is diarrhea predominant. There's IBS-C, which is constipation predominant. There's a form of IBS which is like a mixed picture where people alternate between diarrhea and constipation. And then there's IBS not otherwise classified. Yes, that truly is a diagnostic category. It's like, it's IBS, but we don't know what to call it. So depending on what type of IBS you have, like if you're constipation predominant, a whole food plant-based diet is just about guaranteed to fix you. For fairly obvious reasons, you're going to have a massive increase in fibre. If you're constipated, 99 times out of 100, it's because your diet has been lacking fibre. So great, we tick them off, they're fine, they're good. They might get a little bloating initially when they first increase their fibre intake, but the IBS-C people, they're usually fixed on a whole food plant-based diet. Now your IBS-D people, they often get better sometimes when they go whole food plant-based. Sometimes they get worse. It has to be said. Sometimes they get worse, because there is a percentage of IBS cases that are due to something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So you've got bacteria that should live down in your colon, but they've ended up in your small intestine instead. And it's not good to have them there. They ferment carbohydrate. That produces a lot of gas. The gas can cause bloating, abdominal distension and bloating. So, you know, this is where people get the food baby. They eat and then half an hour later they go, whoa! So that scene from Alien, you know, something's about to pop out. And women will say, like, I look 6 months pregnant. It's ridiculous. And there can be pain associated with that, because all of that build-up of gas in a place where gas ain't meant to be, that triggers off nerves in the stomach. The brain interprets that as pain, and so you get this whole cycle of bloating and pain and loose bowel movements, and particularly if it's hydrogen-producing bacteria, they cause more rapid intestinal transit times. So in other words, the poo kind of shoots through your bowel too fast and it comes out really loose and unformed and watery. So there can be a world lot of trouble that goes on when a person with that IBS-D type goes whole food plant-based. And I usually send them off to get a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth breath test. And if we find out that they've got bacteria growing in the wrong place, that can be treated with very specific probiotics, sometimes prebiotics. Sometimes people will actually need some herbal antimicrobials just to skitch those bacteria and get them out of the place where they're not meant to be. They're usually not bad bacteria as such. They're just bacteria that move to the wrong place.
Okay.
So that's one case. Now,
you can remove those with probiotics. And actually, while we're on the subject of poo, what's the perfect? The elephant in the room. Come on.
So, some people will have seen the Bristol stool scale. If you haven't, just pause this, go look it up on, go into Google Images and just search for the Bristol stool scale. And you'll see a lot of different images. Some of them are very humorous. I actually saw one the other day that had been made with various forms of chocolate. And so the Bristol stool scale is a representation of poo, all the way from constipated little nuggets. As I recall, I think they were represented with Jaffas in this, was Jaffas, yeah, in this particular representation that I saw recently. So we go from the constipated little rabbit pellets up one end to just the diarrhea up the other end, which was represented by melted chocolate. I'll leave you your imagination to fill in the blanks there. So your perfect poo is like a 4 to 5 on the Bristol stool scale. So it goes from 1 to 7. So a poo ought to have some degree of form to it. It shouldn't just be a shapeless blob in the toilet bowl. We like them kind of big and bulky because that indicates that there's plenty of fibre in there. They should be very easy to pass. You should not be reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. They don't even have that anymore. You shouldn't be able to, scroll through your entire Instagram while you're on the toilet. And when you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, if you're not pooping once a day, you're probably not doing this right. So I'd say 2 poops a day is pretty standard practice for people who are eating like a good high fiber whole food plant-based diet. And some people will have a poop 3 times a day. It's like eat, poop, eat, poop, eat, poop. So sorry, that I didn't mean eat your poop. I mean eat and then poop. That came out so wrong. So eat a meal, poop it out, eat a meal. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. That did come out wrong, but you recovered well.
I heard myself and went, yeah, let's just edit that bit.
So, okay, let's go back to the IBS. So we've talked about the 2 types so far of IBS. Which were? Yeah,
so you've got your diarrhea predominant, you've got your constipation predominant, and there is also a pretty common type which is alternating. So they get the runs and then they get constipated and don't go for 3 days, and then they're chained to the toilet and they'll go 16 times in one day and then they won't go again for days. So somewhere between 60 and 80% of IBS cases they do involve small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if you're trying the usual dietary maneuvers, avoiding eating too late at night, avoiding eating too much at once, splitting your fibre intake. If you're doing that and nothing's working, I'd suggest having the SIBO breath test, especially if you get bloating. Bloating's the real giveaway for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's not the only cause of bloating, but if you get bloating plus a lot of those other symptoms, chances are you have SIBO. It is treatable. Mm-hmm. The other thing that gets underway with IBS is something called visceral hypersensitivity, and I'll cover this briefly because it's maybe a little bit about outside the scope of our conversation tonight. But it's basically where the brain starts registering any movement in the gut whatsoever as being pain. And so just the normal movement of food and waste through the digestive tract, the brain says that hurts, that hurts, that hurts. And then you get into this real vicious circle where people just, whatever they eat, they seem to bloat after eating. And so as well as working on the SIBO front there, that's where I would bring in the EFT, because there's such a strong connection between the brain up here and the brain that runs the gut, which we call the enteric nervous system, or the gut brain, the second brain. So often in order to sort IBS out, you actually need to deal with this brain, because people with IBS have a higher rate of anxiety and a higher rate of depression. It's not just because their gut hurts and they poop too much or too little. There's actually, when you've got disturbed gut function, you tend to become more anxious and depressed, and vice versa. So you've got to actually deal with that sort of psychological contributing factor in order to really deal with IBS in many cases.
So that's interesting. So how does EFT do that? And what is EFT?
Yeah, EFT is, it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and it's a form of kind of like self-applied acupressure. So you're tapping just with fingertip pressure on acupuncture points on the face, on the body, on the hands. And the physiological effect is it turns on the relaxation response. This is super duper relevant to gut health, because your okay, there's nervous system 101. All right, so everyone knows, like, you've got the conscious arm of your nervous system. So if I decide I want to pick up my phone, I just, my brain tells my hand muscle, like my arm and my hand, to reach out and pick up my phone. Right, here we go. So that's great for anything I want to do consciously. What about all the stuff my body does that I have no conscious involvement in? Now, I want to have conscious involvement in whether my heart is beating, or whether my lungs are breathing, or what the heck my gut is doing. Because imagine, what it would be like if you had to remember to tell your heart to beat. You'd be dead pretty quickly, because you'd just forget. You get busy doing something else and you'd forget. Like, you'd be checking your Facebook feed and go, oh no, I forgot to tell my heart to beat. I'm dead. So we have this, what's called an autonomic nervous system, to manage all the stuff that we just don't want to be involved with consciously. And that autonomic nervous system is divided into what we call the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic is the stress response, fear, fight, flight. The parasympathetic is the relaxation response, rest, digest, and heal. It's not that one is bad and one is good. It's just that we need an appropriate balance between the two. And for everything in your gut to work properly, the parasympathetic nervous system has to be on and the sympathetic has to be off. Otherwise, the sympathetic's on, that's basically the fear, fight, flight response. That's you wind back 200,000 years on the savannah, just saw a big furry animal with sharp teeth running toward you, went, oh crap, and started running. And your body says, forget about that digestion thing. We couldn't be bothered digesting lunch, because if we hang around doing that, we will be lunch for the big furry animal with sharp teeth that's running after us. So in circumstances like that, sympathetic on, parasympathetic off, digestion off. Okay, so hydrochloric acid secretion off, stomach not contracting the way it should, small intestines not moving things through the way they should, nothing works. So when people eat when they're stressed, they have bad digestion. They get gas, they get bloating, they often will get diarrhea. Sometimes when people are really super anxious all the time, they get constipated. It's like their whole nervous system's just going and won't even let the poop out. So when we do EFT, we're turning on the relaxation response. We're turning on the parasympathetic nervous system, and that helps to retrain the gut to basically work properly. So what we do with EFT is we're stimulating acupuncture points, and then we're tuning into the thing it is that bothers us. It could be a body sensation like bloating or pain. It could be a feeling like loneliness or sadness or guilt. It could be a thought like, I shouldn't have said that thing to so-and-so, now he's going to hate me. And very often it's all of the above. So in other words, people will often have a physical sensation that they feel a lot, like a tightness in the throat, or that churning feeling in the gut, or a feeling of pressure in the heart. And if you ask them, so what's going on? They'll say, well, I always get that when I feel scared to speak up for myself, or I'm worried that, what I ask for, someone else is going to be angry with me and they'll reject me and all of this. Okay, so that's what we sort of aim the tapping at, in a sense.
Okay, so it's like turning the light switch on or off, depending on which nervous system you want to activate. So why can't people turn off the stress activation that's happening?
Yeah. Oh God, I love that question, because, okay, again, the stress response is basically a survival response. And so if you ever watch nature documentaries, you'll often see those kind of, predator chasing prey sequences, right? So the bunny rabbit's just having a munch, like you do when you're a bunny rabbit. And then the fox runs after it and, spots the bunny rabbit, starts running after it. And the rabbit goes, oh, crap, abandons lunch and off he hops. And if he's pretty fast and he got a head start, he'll manage to, evade the fox. More often than not, they do. And then that bunny rabbit, he or she has just been running, hopping, whatever, for his life. And yet the rabbit doesn't go, oh my God, I just had a near-death experience. He doesn't go like tell all his rabbit buddies, oh, I'm deeply traumatized, I think I need therapy. No, the rabbit, once the rabbit realizes, oh good, I lost the fox, it'll do a physical reset. So often animals will roll on the grass, or they'll rub their backs against a tree, or they'll shake. Like you often says, like this. They do a physical reset, and they're extraordinarily good at just shaking off their stress response. And then it's like, I lost the fox. Good. Where's lunch? And they just get back on with it, right? And humans just almost uniformly suck at that. So we go through stress and then we do the, oh my God, do you ever believe what just happened? And then we replay it in our minds, and we just make this big thing out of it, we turn into this big story. And I think it's like our intelligence. We use it against ourselves in that, like, the rabbit doesn't kind of maybe even have the cognitive capacity to sort of go, whoa, that was a close one, wasn't it? It just sort of goes, okay, I'm alive, that grass is looking good, let's get back on with it, let's do rabbit stuff.
So we get locked in this loop. We get locked in this loop.
Yeah, the short answer to your question is we think too much. We overthink what happened to us, and then we kind of relive the stuff that we didn't like over and over again, and we tell ourselves a big story about why that happened and what it means. And then, of course, we look into the future and we say, oh, God, I bet that'll happen again. And then we go through life just expecting all the crappy stuff to happen, and we don't notice when life is good and all of that. So what EFT does is it helps you become conscious of the story, of that whole stream of thoughts that's running through your head. And it breaks the emotional connection with those thoughts. And in this way, it's quite different to standard psychology techniques like cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, because CBT aims to change your thoughts. Like, the premise of CBT is that you have these irrational or maladaptive thoughts, and they cause certain emotions which you don't like, and that makes you engage in certain behaviours which you don't like. And so if you want to change that, you need to change your thoughts. And EFT comes at it from a different angle. It's like, you can have the thought, but you don't need to feel any which way about it. So when you pair, for example, that stress-inducing, or when you pair a thought that would normally have you flipping out, like, I've got to give a presentation at work tomorrow, I hate speaking in public, I'm sure I'm going to get sweaty palms and I'll get tongue-tied and everyone will look at me and go, ha, you suck at this. So normally, of course, when people run that thought or that scenario through their mind, they're already getting sweaty palms. They're already noticing that they feel sick and their heart is racing. But if you're running through that scenario in your mind while at the same time you're inducing a relaxation response, you're exposing your brain to something that would normally freak you out, but you're having a relaxation response. And your brain kind of goes, huh, this is different. I'm not used to feeling relaxed when I imagine myself, you know, giving a presentation at work and whatever. And the way that I see it is it kind of jumps your brain off the track that it would normally go down.
Okay.
That sort of rut of thinking and feeling and behaving. Yeah. And suddenly suddenly all these other options open up, like your brain can see them. And because one of the other things that happens when you turn on the relaxation response is blood flow patterns in the brain change. Okay, so when we're stressed, the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex really shuts down, and blood flow instead is shunted to the regions of the brain that deal with reflex behaviors. Again, think of where the stress response originates from. It's like, big furry animal is chasing me. I don't really have time to ponder my options here. I just need to run. So we don't want to sort of go through some big thinking process of what should I do to evade the big furry animal. It's just run like hell. But that means that your options are very narrow, okay? So in other words, people do their worst thinking when they're stressed. They make their worst choices when they're stressed.
You're not accessing the whole brain.
Precisely. You put yourself into that relaxation response and suddenly you're getting blood into the prefrontal cortex again. That part of the brain is coming online, and then you start to go, huh, maybe I would be okay in that presentation. Maybe there's something that I could do to settle myself beforehand. Or maybe even if I do cock it up, it doesn't really matter, because actually people don't tend to laugh at you and go, ha ha, when you get tongue-tied while doing your presentation. Because most people are going, oh God, I hate that too. Oh God. Like, they're on your
They have empathy instead. They have empathy. So how does that, so the tapping allows you to access relaxation. And with that relaxation, then that relaxes your digestive system. If we bring it back.
Yes, 100%.
And then you can start to digest and assimilate the food that's going through, and you don't start to feel this pain.
That's right. Yeah, it's not instantaneous. I'm not saying that's the only thing that you need to do, but for many people, as well as making alterations in their diet, as well as checking out the SIBO side of it and dealing with that, if you find it, the other really important part is like dealing with that psychological element, the anxiety that you feel. I mean, the other thing is that people who've had functional gastrointestinal disturbances like IBS for a while, they get to the point where they're just scared. They're scared of food. They're scared to eat. They sit down to breakfast and they say, oh, will I bloat? Will I feel sick? Will this give me diarrhea? And so the whole act of eating becomes quite disturbing to them. And that's a like a misconnection that we can break with EFT and get them back into a place where they enjoy food.
Yeah, excellent. So it's a good tool to help break that pattern, especially the psychological things where you don't want to eat, or you're scared to eat because you think it's going to hurt and it may not be. Now,
or just generalized anxiety that feeds into that whole stress response that shuts down proper functioning of the gut. Yeah.
Awesome. So with people with IBS, they start eating grains and legumes, and it creates a lot of bloating and wind. If someone came to you, had just as standard symptoms of IBS, and they wanted to go down a whole food plant-based diet, how would you guide them into eating that way to minimise the pain while the gut flora changes?
Totally, yeah. So number one thing, I mean, firstly, a lot of the time I will send them off for SIBO breath testing. And if I find out that they're positive for SIBO, I'm going to treat that depending on what kind of SIBO it is. It depends on how I treat it. But in terms of diet, I will temporarily put them on a low FODMAP diet just to ease discomfort. And then once we've got the bloating under control and the abnormal bowel movement settled down, I want to get them onto a good range of fermentable carbohydrates, which is what we get in our legumes and our whole grains and our veggies and fruits. But I'm going to do it slowly. I'm going to reintroduce these foods pretty slowly. And I'm going to do it while they're taking a probiotic that settles down their gut, and often a prebiotic that's already starting to feed up the beneficial bacteria in the colon that can handle the likes of legumes and whole grains and whatnot. But yeah, if you rush these people who bloat a lot straight onto a high legume, high grain, high fruit and vegetable diet, they can really just be in a lot of pain and discomfort, and it's not very pleasant. So those people with just kind of twitchy, dodgy guts just need to step into it more slowly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Diana Goodman, who suffered from IBS, and she's done really well eating this way. That's what she did. She went slowly, scared to eat legumes. And did some research on that, and she just slowly introduced them. And now she can totally...
100%, and that's what happens.
Really comfortable.
Yeah, that's it. But if you've never eaten legumes before, and then you suddenly start eating a cup and a half, 2 cups a day, oh my goodness, there could be stormy weather down there, you know. I get people to start off with literally just 1 tablespoon of cooked red lentils, or very, very well cooked, preferably pressure cooked chickpeas, just so they're kind of soft and mushy. And actually, if you blend them into a soup or blend them into hummus, they're even more digestible. So I just do these maneuvers to get them to the most digestible point. And then, that tablespoon per day turns into 2 tablespoons, and then 3. And they just gradually work their way up until they can handle, lovely Mexican food that we had at your place, right? Lots of black beans. But if you hit them up with a cup of black beans first up, it's not going to be pretty.
No, there's a lot of gas and a lot of wind. And in our program, we do hit them up with that at the start. And there's been a lot of wind. But after 3 weeks, it disappears. But, it's interesting. Yeah. I might adjust that and make note that if you do have these symptoms, we're going to...
Yeah. If your gut's fine, then go for it. Eat your black beans. It can be kind of fun to have a little extra gas. You can have competitions in your family. Like, let's play Fart the National Anthem or something. But...
Yeah. It's uncomfortable.
But if you suffer from visceral hypersensitivity, it's actually not funny, because you don't just fart and say, ha, I farted. You get all this gas build-up, and it actually hurts a lot. So these people, you don't want to rush them onto legumes, because they can really end up in pain.
Yeah, no, that's good. So we're on the topic of IBS, but we were talking about the tapping, the EFT.
Yeah.
There's a lady in our group who has given up smoking, and she used to be vegetarian her whole life, and now she's going whole food plant-based, but she can't stop eating the sweet things. She's actually asked, can you point her in the right direction in regards to, would there be a tapping that she could actually do that instead of eating?
Okay, there is really no such thing as like a set script or whatever that you tap on. You will sometimes see tapping scripts on the web. I'm not a fan of them, because when you do EFT, it needs to be personalized to you. So I can give some general recommendations for this. When people quit smoking, Sorry, let me rewind here. Okay, why do people start smoking? They don't do it because when they had their first cigarette, it tastes great and they feel marvelous. In fact, if you've ever dabbled with smoking, the first cigarette that you have, it tastes disgusting. It burns your throat. You cough. Your body just says, "What the heck is this? Get it out of me." But when people become smokers, they've basically got to the point where smoking is doing something for them. Most people become smokers because It helps them deal with social anxiety. So they get a little nervous being around, groups of people, but if they smoke, smoking causes release of acetylcholine and it has a relaxing effect. So if you've been a smoker since you were a teenager, and that is the only way that you've ever known to sort of deal with your anxiety, deal with your loneliness, deal with your whatever, and then you kind of, at some point realize smoking is bad for my health, I should quit. So you quit, but you don't have another strategy for dealing with your feelings. So more often than not, smokers when they quit will eat more. They eat sugar, they eat fat. They're going for that same calming response in their brain. So where I'd start with tapping for this particular woman is just by asking her, when you get that urge to eat, just wait a minute. Just tune your awareness inward and ask yourself, how am I feeling? And what are the thoughts that are running through my head? And that's what you tap on. So in many people, they'll notice they just feel generally anxious. Others will feel very sad, right? A smoker has had 25 friends in a packet. Like you flip the top of that packet, you got 25 friends looking at you. They won't steal your boyfriend. They won't they won't slag you off on Facebook. They never let you down. They never stand you up. They're 25 reliable friends.
Yeah, but they're killing you.
You quit,
you just how can they be friends? They're killing you.
They're bad friends. They're bad friends in that sense. They do kill you in particularly nasty and ugly ways, as anyone who's ever looked at our packaging for cigarettes will tell you. That they've got many ways to kill you. But the way the smoker sees them is, I've got 25 friends and they're always there for me. And so when you quit smoking, you've lost your friends, and people feel a sense of bereavement. Right, there's a sense of loss. I've lost this practice, which kind of kept me going for all these years. And no wonder they go on eat junk food instead, or whatever. So it's dealing with the feelings of loss and grief and sadness, and also there's that sense of missing out on a pleasure. Smoking is pleasurable to smokers. And when they stop, there's that sense of there's that source of pleasure gone. So the next most, socially acceptable and easily available source of pleasure is food. And eventually, of course, people who've quit smoking learn to, or hopefully, they learn to derive pleasure from healthier things than eating sweets or whatever. And then we want to encourage that. Like, exercise is great. Exercise is really, really good for just discharging some of those feelings that people get that would otherwise drive them to eat. I do a lot of tapping on with clients on, for want of a better word, addictions to food, to booze, smokes. You name it, people can get addicted to it, honestly.
Yeah, it's true. Even healthy food, we can get addicted to it, but it's a good thing. Robyn, autoimmune diseases and whole food plant-based diet. I know that that's one of your topics as well. You want to share with us about autoimmune disease?
Absolutely. Autoimmune diseases really on the rise. They're on the march. We're seeing them in younger and younger people. It's dead scary. There's 80 odd of these conditions in which the body's own immune system starts attacking various tissues, cells, whatever. So these are diseases that include things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, Graves' disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, ankylosing spondylitis, psoriasis, so many of these conditions. And despite how varied they are in terms of how they actually show up, like in different parts of the body with different symptoms, there is an underlying common thread, which is that there's increased or abnormal gut permeability, or what's popularly called leaky gut. That's a driver with all these autoimmune conditions. The Western diet promotes leaky gut through a couple of ways. You know, processed foods contain a lot of emulsifiers that aggravate leaky gut. If you're eating a diet that's high in animal products, those animal products promote the growth of bacteria and actually even contain bacteria that are called gram-negative. And these gram-negative bacteria have something in their cell wall called endotoxin. And endotoxin actually damages the lining of the small intestine, the gut, and makes it leaky. Then the other thing which is really, really interesting is that the typical Western diet that's so low in fibre actually starves bacteria that live in our colon, and as a result the bacteria that live in our colon actually start eating the mucus lining of the colon instead. That brings them into contact with the cells that line the colon, and that triggers autoimmunity. So there's a husband and wife researcher team called Justin and Erica Sonnenberg, and they wrote a really seminal paper called Starving Our Microbial Self. I think you can actually, this is like an open access article, I think. I know I've got full text of it. But if you just Google Starving Our Microbial Self, it'll probably pop up. And they basically present research saying that you know, we are generating autoimmunity with the Western diet. Now, you know, you do have to have a genetic predisposition to develop autoimmunity. Not everyone has that, but let's face it, when you look at the skyrocketing rates of autoimmunity that we're seeing over the past decade or so, you can't explain that with genes. Yeah. Genes don't mutate that quickly. So in other words, in the past, we've had a stack of people with a genetic predisposition to autoimmunity who never developed it because they didn't eat the crappy diet that everyone's eating now. Now we've got the genes plus the crappy diet. You know, you've got the perfect storm for generating autoimmune disease.
Excellent. So, yeah, so meat, dairy, animal products, processed foods, damaging the microbiome, creating microbiome that eat the mucus inside the wall of the stomach, of the intestine, and then
the colon in
the colon, and because of that, it generates these skin conditions, all the autoimmune type. Thyroid
conditions, joint conditions, all the many and varied presentations of autoimmunity. I forgot to mention type 1 diabetes. That's also autoimmune and also on the rise. And what's really interesting is that there was this study done in Finland which has a really high rate of type 1 diabetes. And so they identified children who are at genetic risk of type 1 diabetes, basically because they'd had an older sibling diagnosed with it. And they got poo samples from these kiddos, you know, from when they were really young. What they were looking for is, like, are there changes in the gut microbiome that happen before they are diagnosed with diabetes? And yes, sure enough, there were these big shifts in their gut microbiome that occurred before they started developing autoimmunity to their own pancreas, which is how type 1 diabetes gets underway. So in other words, it's the gut that shifts first. That's the kind of that's the triggering event for autoimmunity.
So
and so, you know, we had that evidence for type 1 diabetes. Go ahead.
So, you know, all of these problems that we're having, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, it all is coming back to the health of the gut.
Yeah, I know it's such a cliche now. It's a meme, you know. Gut health is it, but it's true. And Hippocrates said it, you know, 2,000 years ago or whatever it was, 2,500 years ago. Disease begins in the gut. And the thing is that, you know, humans are very arrogant, and we like to think of ourselves as being the pinnacle of creation, and that we're these incredibly intelligent life forms, and we're, you know, we and our brains make all the decisions about our lives. But it's not true. We've got this organ of our bodies, you know, this sort of couple of kilos worth of bacteria and fungi and protozoa and a bunch of other interesting life forms that comprise the microbiome. And this is like it has its own intelligence. That microbiome has its own intelligence. And we, you know, so many of what we think are our decisions, not our decisions solely. For example, you know, gut microbes have food preferences, and because many gut bacteria can produce neurotransmitters, the chemicals that our brain cells use to talk to each other, and they can also manipulate our own what are called enterochromatin cells or hormone-producing cells in our gut. The bacteria can manipulate the activity of those cells as well. So basically, bacteria can amplify the emotional responses that we have that cause us to eat the foods that they like to eat. So in other words, if every time you get really, you know, miserable, you eat chocolate, then your gut bacteria that are kind of chocoholics down, little you know, Cadbury's munching gut bugs, they can actually amplify your crappy moods so that you'll eat more chocolate and feed them.
Wow. So hence it's so if you take that a step further, if we take that into the future, if we start eating foods that make us calm and healthy, it will actually, the more of the foods that create health that you put into your body, feed these microbiomes and make them grow, and therefore you'll get healthier and healthier and feel better and better.
Yeah, so two interesting points to make on that. Firstly, it is remarkable how quickly the gut microbiome shifts in response to a change of diet. In studies that I've seen where people were switched from like an all animal diet, so they went from a regular diet to like 100% animal products, fat, protein, no fiber. Within 3 days, the changes in the gut microbiome are already evident. Then if you switch people from that to a diet of exclusively plant foods, again, 3 days later, gut microbiome completely shifts. So in other words, bacteria are very adaptable. And the bacterial populations that feed on fiber will rapidly multiply when you eat more fiber. The ones that feed on bile, which is produced when you eat a high-fat diet, or the ones that putrefy undigested protein, their populations will explode if you go on a high-protein, high-fat diet. So if you go keto, for instance, you're going to see, you do see really awful and dramatic shifts in people's gut microbiota. They get some really mean bugs on board when people do those kinds of diets. Very, very bad bugs. So that's the first thing. Bacteria are adaptable. We can change our microbiome very dramatically. The second thing is that, again, this adaptability means that there are bacteria that will thrive in the gut of a person who's really stressed out. They like that high adrenaline environment. They like the change in pH that occurs there. That's their happy place. On the other hand, if you do eat foods that are, you know, you eat fruits and veggies and you do your pausing, you know, you do your meditation and you de-stress, you do your tapping, whatever, and now you're creating this environment in your gut that's more conducive to bacteria that kind of like it when you're chilled. So you've got your stress junkie, like adrenaline junkie bacteria that kind of dig it when you're all stressy. And then you've got your laid back bacteria who, you know, like it when you're in a calm place. And whatever state you're in, you change the environment of your body, and that causes shifts in your bacteria, it causes shifts in the balance of your bacterial population.
Yeah, okay. So even if you're not eating something, depending on your mood, your state, can shift the bacteria. You can get bacteria that, if you're in an anxious state or a stress state, will start to populate.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
they'll start craving and wanting foods that they want to eat, which is a bad thing. entering a spiral. So it's so important. What I teach in the program is eat, move, and pause.
Yeah.
So the pausing is a big thing if you want to bring in the gut bacteria that's going to start to want to eat other food, foods that make them calm.
I would also say it is really, really critical to to ensure that you're in a calm state before you eat. Mm-hmm. We live in a culture in which people eat out of a paper bag while they're driving the car. They're standing up over the sink and shoveling down food while they're barking orders at the kids, trying to get them out the door in the morning. This is not the state to be in when you're eating. We've lost our sense of occasion with food. In Italy, in France, you sit down to have a meal. None of this munching on something while you walk down the street talking on your phone. You sit down at the table, you have a conversation with people, the table is set. You're not watching the telly while you're eating a meal. You're not doing this sort of mindless shoveling that people in our culture do. It's so wrong. The initial stage of digestion is called the cephalic phase. So cephalic meaning brain. So we start consuming, the whole process of digestion starts up when we look at our food, when we think about our food. Maybe think about where it came from, who grew that food. And it's so lovely to do that with plants because, plants are colourful. They're beautiful. They have interesting textures. Maybe if you buy from farmer's market or something, you actually know the people who grew your food. And I mean, even if you don't, even if you just got it from Woolies, you can still look at that food and have a sense of appreciation for it. So sit down, look at the food, smell the food, think about where the food came from. Close the door on whatever you were doing before you sat down to eat, and actually get yourself into the right frame of mind to eat and enjoy the meal. And that'll go a long way toward dealing with functional gastrointestinal disorders, a lot like IBS and functional bloating and reflux syndromes as well. Yeah.
So with autoimmune, why does a whole food plant-based diet, why do autoimmune diseases respond extremely well to a whole food plant-based diet? Because we had a lady in our group, Julie Blake, psoriasis for 30 years. Within 2 weeks, it disappeared. It's now 10, 11 months later, and it hasn't come back. She gets, every now and then, it gets a little scaly bit, but hardly ever.
Yeah. So, okay, this warning, religious content may offend some viewers. People who've had a Catholic upbringing, I didn't, by the way, I'm just kind of interested in various approaches to this, but in Catholic theology, there are two forms of sin. There are sins of omission and sins of commission. So a sin of omission is there was something good that you should have done and you didn't do it. And then a sin so did I say that right? Sin of omission, good thing that you should have done and you didn't do it. And then a sin of commission is you did a bad thing, you knew it was bad, you did it anyway. The interesting thing is that in Catholic theology, both sins are equally sinful. So how does this relate to food? Well, when we eat, we have sins of omission and sins of commission. So a sin of commission is when you eat, some crappy food, some highly processed, what used to be a plant food, but now it got turned into a donut, or you eat an animal food or whatever. And then you've got sins of omission. So you're not eating your fruit and veg, right? And both these, and I mean, I'm saying this tongue in cheek. Sin has nothing to do with food, but I hope you get my drift. Yeah, but both of those types of sin apply to autoimmune disease. So you're eating stuff that feeds your bad bugs, causes your gut to get all leaky, causes your immune system to make mistakes. And you're also not eating the foods that calm down that response. We know that plant foods have an anti-inflammatory effect on the body. We know that plant foods help to normalize that excessive immune response to that's the hallmark of autoimmunity. So with a whole food plant-based diet, you kind of deal with both your sins. You stop doing bad stuff and you start doing good stuff.
Yeah, you're going to get it.
Now, with autoimmunity, like,
you're going to have
heaven, that's it, health heaven.
Health heaven. Go to confession.
Now, there's nothing to confess. I ate my kale and I didn't eat donuts. Good. Go in peace, my child.
Man, I can laugh at this because I grew up.
So with autoimmune disease, like sometimes you like that one. I made that one up. I'm proud of it. So with autoimmune disease, sometimes you just fix the food and you get people, doing their stress management, doing their pausing, and that's it. You're done. Problem solved. Sometimes, particularly with very long-standing autoimmune disease, it does take more than that. And I'm a fan of water-only fasting, medically supervised water-only fasting is a game changer for people whose autoimmune disease has got better on a plant-based diet but hasn't got all the way better. So that combination is very hard to beat. So medically supervised water-only fasting followed by a really sort of high nutrient, whole food plant-based diet, plenty of greens, all those high antioxidant fruit and veg. And that does the job for most people. One exception, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. You can't do the greens and the beans and whatnot. These people's bowels are just totally shredded. They need a very highly modified plant-based diet. I see a lot of these people with inflammatory bowel disease. If you put them on the kind of diet that works wonders for your diabetics and your heart disease patients and whatever, they will get 10 times worse. So you modify the diet initially until the bowel settles down, and then you can gradually ease them onto a good, well-structured whole food plant-based diet.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like we're all different. We've all got different conditions, and it's very individual. And you need, if you have got a condition, it's good to see somebody like yourself and other plant-based doctors or healthcare professionals to get some specific advice around those issues that you can get relief.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Then you're fine. You can run on with it, And
totally. Most people can just pick up the sort of off-the-shelf whole food plant-based diet, apply it, and they'll be great. Yep. But for people who've got autoimmune diseases, people who've got IBS, they will probably need some tweaking of their diet. And rather than just waste a whole bunch of time and money and whatever trying to sort of experiment on yourself, I would recommend just go and see someone who's seen a lot of this before and can say, I know what you've got and I know how to help.
Yep, fantastic. Yep, and you've helped a lot of people with those. I know that. I've spoken to a lot of people that have, that you've helped and treated.
Yeah,
you've had an incredible result. I seem to draw in the hard cases, and sometimes they are extremely challenging. These people can have just layer upon layer of issues, but it's pretty satisfying when you unravel that big mess and just restore their health. It's very, very fun. Awesome. So there's a few other questions here, if you don't mind. Can we run through those, give us some answers to specific things that people have got, and then we can wrap up? Is that okay?
Sounds good. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, here's a very specific question. My question to Robyn is lymphomas, multiple lymphomas. not just one or two, but hundreds. Upper legs, arms, chest, stomach. And the doctors have asked, that this person's asked, seem to not know much about them. And Dr. Google is not much help either. How do I get rid of them without surgery?
Hang on a minute. Is this lymphoma or is it? Because lymphoma is actually pneumonia.
So I'm not sure what she means by that. What is a lymphoma?
Yeah, might need some clarification there, because lymphoma is actually a malignancy. This is a hematological cancer, basically, and I doubt a person in that situation would just have doctors saying, well, we don't know, because normally that would be medically treated. Now, if it is lymphoma, there are a number of different types of lymphomas. Some of them are what are called indolent, so they're quite slow growing, and they respond beautifully to a water-only fast. So now, if the wording wasn't correct there, it might be good just to clarify that, and make sure that I'm on the right track there.
Okay, I can't clarify it now, but I'll do it later, or maybe she can get in touch with you.
Okay.
The other thing is, another lady, she's done extremely well eating this way. She's lost over 30 kilos. Blood pressure's coming down.
Wow.
Down. Yep. Amazing. She said at night her feet swell at the end of the day. And a hot feeling in the feet.
Okay.
Once again, it's a bit specific, but...
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and without any other background on this person, I can throw out a few ideas. One might be, is she salt sensitive? Is she getting some swelling at the end of the day because of her sodium intake? We'd have to look at her diet to figure that out. Is she on her feet a lot? Blood pools in the lower extremities if we're standing for long periods of time. So if she stands up, then she's going to get some swelling in her feet, and then she just needs to basically move around. Like, I'm at a standing desk now, so I've been standing up while we've been talking, and I'm aware that I've actually got to move, sort of go up and down on my toes, just to activate those calf muscles and stop blood from pooling in my lower legs and feet. And so you also said feeling hot at night. Is that feeling hot all over, or just hot in
the feet? A hot feeling in the feet. So swelling in the feet and a hot feeling in the feet at night.
Hot feeling in the feet specifically. Yeah, God. Without any other background, I'm really kind of in the dark there. They're the two things that I think of straight up. Is she on her feet all day in a standing position as walking? And what's her sodium intake? That's what I'd look at first. I'd also be interested in knowing her age. Is this, if she is menopausal, there may possibly be some link to what her hormones are doing.
Cool, thanks. Once again, these specific ones, I'm not going to actually ask them. I'm going to send them to you because they're so individual, and you need more clarification around them before you could advise. I
do. There's a bit. When you study what's called differential diagnosis as part of any medical or health related qualification, you basically spend an entire year memorizing these vast lists of symptoms and the conditions that can cause them. And the differential diagnosis for most common symptoms is pages and pages long. So it could be this, it could be that, it could be something else. You don't know without getting more background.
I appreciate that, no problem. So, question on osteoporosis. Okay, how to prevent more bone density loss, and specifically how to build bone density on a whole food plant-based diet?
Yeah, okay. This is a really critical one because, like I mentioned before, that hair gets thinner and skin gets thinner as we get older. And the other thing that happens is bones get thinner. And so that's a normal age-related change. So When women are told that their bones are thinning when they go through menopause, well, duh. They do that. They do that no matter how healthily you eat and how active you are. There's just a natural thinning process of bones. When that gets really excessive, called osteoporosis, and women in particular are prone to this because we have smaller bones to start with, and then we have this kind of fairly rapid loss of bone density around menopause. So there is very good evidence that a diet that is rich in alkalizing minerals, especially potassium, magnesium, from fruit and veg, helps to reduce bone loss. So there's some really, fabulous research going back into the 1990s about this, that the higher the intake of fruit and veg, the lower the bone loss. But I can't emphasize this enough. The major way that you prevent bone loss and reverse it if it's already started is exercise. There's no way around that. There's there's a physiological law called Wolff's Law. That's Wolff with two F's, WOLFF, Wolff's Law, which basically says the more load you place on bone, the stronger and the thicker it gets. So you need to exercise, it needs to be weight bearing, and walking is not enough. Strength training is a bit foreign to many women, but you got to do it. You don't necessarily have to go to the gym and pick up dumbbells next to the sweaty guys with the muscle shirts and, who grunt a lot. But you do need to be doing something where you're working against resistance, so that you can use resistance bands, you can use all of those funny, loopy hooky things that you put over your door frame or your doorknob or whatever. You've got to be working your muscles. So lifting heavy weights, pulling on resistance bands. Of course, your own body weight can serve as a weight as well. So the old calisthenic exercises like push-ups and pull-ups and chin-ups and sit-ups and squats and lunges. These are all really good. Yeah, they're fabulous. But you'll reach a plateau if you're only doing body weight where your bones won't get any stronger. You actually have to add more load. So I'm a big fan of strength training. Start wherever you're at. Get some.
I know you are. Even though when you're here, I know you are. Even when you're here in Byron, you're in the gym.
I know. We found the most awesome gym, and went to this killer class. It was like, I've never sweated so much in my entire life. They were good. Yeah. Anyone's in Byron, it's what was the name of it? I forgot the name. Manor, I think it was. MANA, something like that. Yeah, they were good. Yeah. Definitely good.
Something Park. Yeah, they were good. Well,
in Suffolk, yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay, so osteoporosis we talked about there. Let me just have a quick glance at these. Okay, this is a question that comes up with people a lot, especially with the low oil and fats. So the question here is, can you tell us what medical studies have been done regarding cutting out good fats, which I'm assuming, olive oil and coconut oil that people class as good fats, out of a normal person's diet, and what the research showed?
Yep, there hasn't been any. If I can answer that question really, really simply. When you look at research that claims to compare or claims to study a low-fat diet, typically these diets comprise 25 to 30% calories from fat. So really the only studies that have been done on a truly low-fat diet are the ones that you are familiar with and many people in your group will be familiar with. This is the work of Dean Ornish. So reversing heart disease by putting people on a diet that contained on average 10% calories from fat. And of course, Caldwell-Esselstyn, whose patients often got to 6, 7, 8% calories from fat. So in terms of clinical studies, we know that these people reverse heart disease and lose weight and do just fine. Do we have any other kind of large-scale studies? No, we don't. No, we don't, because researchers don't do this. Oh, sorry, one exception. Neil Barnard and his large and growing team of researchers at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They similarly use around about a 10% fat diet in their studies, where they're working on everything from women's period pain to type 2 diabetes to you name it, and they always go for this low-fat diet. In terms of population research, we know that one of the 5 blue zones, Okinawa, the southernmost island of Japan, which formerly boasted the highest percentage of centenarians in of any population in the world, they ate a diet that was around about 6% calories from fat. So we know that human populations have lived on a very low-fat diet and done just fine. And we know that when people switch from their regular diet to a low-fat diet, they also do fine. But that we're talking about, in terms of clinical studies, these are not like, 10,000 people being put on this diet. We don't have that data yet.
Mm. What's your thoughts about the no oil?
Oil is a junk food. There's no two ways about it. People are very clear that sugar is a junk food, right? So if you say to people, okay, name me a couple of junk foods, they go, sugar, it's usually the first off the list. Why is sugar a junk food? Because you take a whole food, sugar cane or sugar beets, a whole food that has fiber and protein and carbohydrate and vitamins and minerals and water and a bunch of other things, and you strip all of that out and you're left with one component, sugar. Oil's a junk food. Right? You start with a whole food, avocado, olives, sunflower seeds, corn, whatever the heck. You strip out all the protein, all the carbohydrate, all the fiber, and you're left with this one component, which is fat. So it's a junk food. Oil is very energy dense. It's perilously easy to overeat on oil. Oil is not satiating, so people can have a lot of calories from it and they don't feel full as a result of those calories. It's very, very clear from Esselstyn and Ornish's studies that if you have heart disease, you really want to get oil out of your diet. I just find that people adapt to a healthy diet better if they don't have the oil. Now, in terms of how low do we need to go? Do we need to get rid of sunflower seeds and avocados and almonds and whatever? That's a bit more variable. So if you are, I'm thinking of my son, if you are you've met my son, if you are 17 years old and going through an adolescent growth spurt and very thin, then having nuts and seeds and avocado is good, because you get enough calories in, and that can be hard to do on a whole food plant-based diet, even when you eat as much as my son does. If you are a 50-year-old woman who has a hard time losing weight and you are insulin resistant, so you're just like pre-diabetic, the avocados and nuts and seeds are not your friends. So you can have a little bit, but you've got to be pretty sparing.
Yeah, that's along the lines that I've been sharing with people in the group. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions here. B12, one here always comes up. Robyn, about addressing vitamin B12 intake, as I've read that seaweed and fermented foods like tempeh contain inactive B12, i.e. poorly absorbed. So answer that how you will, and let us know about B12. I mean, I have a whole on B12 in the program and on all of on oils and things, but it's good to hear it from somebody else. So,
vitamin B12 is made by bacteria. The way that humans used to get B12 is we ate dirt. There's no nice way of putting it. Our food wasn't hygienically washed. You just pulled something out of the ground, knocked the clods off or dirt off it and munched it, right? So there's your B12 right there. Now our food supply is very hygienic. And frankly, a lot of the B12 producing bacteria in the soil have been killed through agricultural practices. So we need to supplement with vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 its chemical name is cobalamin, and it comes in various forms. And then what you often get in plants like the ones that were mentioned there in that question is some inactive B12 analogues. So these have a chemical shape, if you like, chemical configuration that's very similar to B12. So they can hop onto B12 receptors and get carried into the body as if they were B12, but they ain't B12. They don't do what B12 does in the body. And so it's not, it's not, the issue is not so much that they reduce absorption of the active B12, is that they kind of substitute themselves for it. It's like they're secret agents who kind of slip in. You think that they're something that they're not. They're traveling under a false passport. They get in through your borders and then, but they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah. And I have seen in the past vegans who were relying on things like spirulina, thinking this is great, it's full of B12, and this is all I need to do. And they ended up with catastrophically low B12, and you can get neurological damage and like a particular type of anemia, macrocytic anemia. And a bunch of just very, very, very bad things can happen. High homocysteine levels, which can damage your arteries. And like that would really suck. If you're eating all these plant foods and no animal foods, you shouldn't have heart disease. But if you run low on B12, you can end up with heart disease, even though you don't eat animal products, you don't eat oil, and you eat your greens and whatever, because of this effect of low B12 on homocysteine levels.
So a lingual spray under the tongue?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the sublingual sprays. There is some debate about what form of B12 we should take. The science is not settled on this, but I tip in favour of methylcobalamin because it's like a pre-activated form of B12. Again, you'll see debate about this, but there's no harm in taking the methylcobalamin form. So even if it's not necessary, I tend to sort of push people in that direction. 500 micrograms spray, depending on your serum level, which you can ask your GP to check, and I recommend that people on plant-based diets do that once a year. So when you go in and get your cholesterol checked and all the rest of it, you just ask for a serum B12. I aim to keep people in a range of 400 to 600 picomoles per litre. If they start going below that, I will increase their frequency of B12. If they go above that, I'll tell them, hey, you can save your money and have it less often.
Yeah, and if you are growing your own organic vegetables and you're not washing them, that's how we used to get B12.
Absolutely. And there is B12 in things like, fortified nutritional yeast, which I am a bit of a fan of.
Yeah, me too. It's delicious. It's delicious.
Vegan crack.
Yeah.
So you'll pick up a little bit that way. And yeah, I like to grow my own sprouts, and we've got a few veggies that are just kind of struggling through our winter here. So, we pick up a bit of B12 through dirt, good old-fashioned dirt. But I do top up with B12 supplements.
Yeah. The thing is, though, we don't know how much we're getting from there. But
exactly. And that's why you really want to have that insurance policy. Take your supplement, get your blood test once a year, make sure that you're on track with B12, because like I said, bad things happen when you're not.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for the questions. Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing.
It's a pleasure.
And especially the hair loss, because, that was a hot debate last week, and I think you've been able to put people at ease with that. Guys, just hang in there. A few more months, it'll probably ease up. And if it's not, come and see Robyn. So, guys, I just want to finish up by, number one, thank you from me and everybody in our group. And if they're on here now, if we're in the Facebook Live, you'd be getting lots of thumbs up and love hearts. So I can picture them coming across the stream now, and they'll be sending that love to you. So it's an amazing group. So thank you from the bottom of the heart for being here. We really appreciate it.
It really is a pleasure.
Thanks. And anybody in the group, if you do have a specific health issue, okay, and you've got concerns about it, like I've said many times, you know, in our group, we cannot diagnose and we cannot prescribe. We just teach you what a whole food plant-based diet is, the principles, and I teach you how to prepare that food and eat it. If you are concerned, Robyn is a really good person to go and see. So if they did want to come and see you, Robyn, where will I send, you know, what's your details?
Yeah.
I'll get them there.
Okay, so just head over to my website, www.empowertotalhealth.com.au. So EMPOWER totalhealth.com.au. I've got literally hundreds of articles on there. So even if you just want to type in the thing that you're concerned about into the search box on my website, chances are I've already written an article on it. So that'll pop up. I also have lots of recipes. I'm not a trained chef like you. I'm just a mug in the kitchen. I'm just an enthusiastic experimenter. So I don't, and I also really seriously suck at food photography. So my photos aren't necessarily pretty, but I do like to mess around in the kitchen, and every week I put a new recipe on my website. I have a free weekly newsletter. You'll see the subscribe box on my website if you want to hop onto my newsletter list, and that way you get the free recipe every week and an article and whatnot. My email address is Robyn so that's Robyn with a Y, by the way, ROBYN at empowertotalhealth.com.au. You can also just hop over to my Facebook page, which is Empower Total Health, and I share a lot of stuff on that, and people often just use Facebook to sort of message me. So you can do that too if you don't want to email me or whatever. I do about 60-70% of my consultations online using Zoom, which we're using right now, which is much more stable than Skype and tends not to crash as much. And so it doesn't matter where you are. I have clients all over the world. There are a few time zones that are tricky, I must admit, but I can generally accommodate people no matter where you are. I can figure out a time to get on Zoom and talk to you. And if you want to come see me in person, I'm in Burraneer in the southern suburbs of Sydney. But yeah, if you're not in my neck of the woods, let's do this thing, you know, virtually. And I think that's about it.
That's it. Guys, I'll put all the links in so people can reach out to you if they want some more information.
Okay.
So once again, thank you. Look forward to seeing you back up here in Byron next time you're here.
Yes.
Or somewhere.
We're up at the end of the year, actually. We're staying in Bangalore this time. So
right, inland, in the hills.
Yeah.
Hinterland. It's good to get out there. You'll love it. So when are you coming up?
Just after Christmas.
Okay, good. We'll be around.
Cool. Catch up there.
Have another dinner. We'll have dinner or something, or lunch again.
You come over to our place this time.
I've got the hat. Well, we could do that. We can do one night at yours. We'll do one night here. It'll be fun.
Sounds like a plan. All right.
So, Robyn, thank you so much. Good to see you again. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for your advice, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds awesome. All right. Love to everyone.